So the next thing that we want to do here is introduce the form tag. Right now what we have is something you might call a form in English, but technically in HTML it's not considered a form. It is just three inputs that are not related. So remember, the point of the form is just a container where we can put our inputs. So yes, they can exist individually outside of a form, and sometimes you will have that. But if this is one form that we want to submit together, then it makes sense for us to make a form tag. So I'm going to go ahead and put this data inside the form tag and save it. And remember, in a form, there are two attributes that we discussed. There's action, which is where the form sends data to. And then there's also method, which is what HTTP method get or post. Okay, so if we refresh the page, nothing will change, or it will appear like nothing changes. There is one really small aesthetic change, however. If I add some text here and I don't have the form tag, you'll see that everything is in line. But as soon as I add the form tag, however, the form pushes down that text into a new line, which means that the form tag is a block level element. So that's a very minor thing. Other than that, it looks identical. There is functionally a change though. My form now actually does something. It's not very impressive, but if I fill out username and password and I hit submit, pay attention right here. You'll see my page actually refreshes and my data disappears. This button to refresh the page is engaged briefly, as you can see. So my form is being sent, but the thing is, it's being sent to the same place where I currently am. So by default, if I don't specify an action, it's going to go ahead and go to the exact same place where I am. Just refresh the page. And if I don't specify the method, it's going to be a GET request. So we can go in and we can change that. So we could say action equals http://wikipedia.org, and method will be a GET request. So I refresh the page. Let's fill out some data here and click submit. This time it's not going to send a request to the page I'm on. It's going to send a request to Wikipedia. So that's the point of action. It's where we send data to. Of course, we're not really going to send data to Wikipedia or Google or Facebook from a form. We're going to send data to our own server, our own backend that we created. But we don't have that yet. So for now, we're just demonstrating how we can alter where data goes by altering the action. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get rid of both of these and keep it as forms. Our action is going to refresh the same page that we're on, and method is going to be get. And if you're feeling all confused about that, we will spend a lot more time talking about HTTP request methods and actions. For now, this is purely about the front end of making the form. So one other thing I want to talk about here is that when we actually submit this form, the data is sent along with this request, and there's a way for us to see that. So if we give a name to each piece of data that we want to be sent, so it's a name attribute, I'm going to call it username on the username input, and then I'm going to say name equals password on the password field, and I save this. So I go back here and refresh the page, and I type in username Bob, and password will be test123. Pay attention up here as I submit this. And as you can see, I get my data added in this new format that we haven't seen. It's called a query string. Another one of those topics we'll be devoting a lot more time to when we get to Express. So basically, it's a question mark followed by key value pairs separated by ampersands. So I have username, which is the name that I set equal Bob, which is a value from that input. And password is the name I set equals test123. So the whole point of this is that we can give names to our pieces of data so that we can retrieve them later. So of course, we wouldn't actually send a password through the URL. We don't actually let any user see the password. And that's because we use a post request usually rather than a get request. And there are ways of getting around this. Again, this is all for later in the series, but what's important is that this isn't something I'm showing you because you'll do it all the time. I'm showing it to you because it illustrates the fact that when we type something into a form and give it some data and I click submit, the data is taken out of that form and a request is sent somewhere. And in this case, it is sent to the same place where we are already. But if we change this action, so let's go back to wikipedia.org. So we'll just type here, username Bob, password test123. You will see it takes me to wikipedia.org and then it adds my data here. So we successfully sent a request using that form, and in that request, the data was extracted from the username and password field and then sent along with our request. So that's the foundation of all the types of form that we're going to do. It's not always a GET request, but our forms later on are going to extract it and send it somewhere, and then we'll process the data and receive it on the back end.